Hey everybody, welcome to Mud Girl Pottery YouTube series on how to throw stuff. My name is Melanie and I'm the owner of Madison and Boot and Mud here in New Jersey. I've been throwing pots for about 20 years. I am a hashtag clay addict, and if you would like to be a hashtag clay addict as well, please feel free to subscribe to these videos. I'm hoping to be able to simplify all the steps to throwing pots to make it easier for a person to become addicted as well. This is not an easy craft slash skill slash art. Lots of little baby steps, but we're asking you to do them all at once. So I figure if I'm able to kind of shrink them all down to make it a little easier and a little more understandable, then maybe more of you will get into it and we can keep this amazing art alive. Today I'm going to be making a sexy pot. Now, a sexy pot is not a technical term. I didn't learn this in college. One of our instructors, Jen, came up with it. Basically, it's a vase slash vase, but you know, everyone gets confused over whether it's vase or vase. So we call it the sexy pot. So basically, this is a sexy pot. There are lots of different types of sexy, as there are with women in the world and men in the world. Basically, what we're working from is a cylinder. Everything gets based on a cylinder or a bowl. So we're basing this off of the cylinder. The inside says cylinder. And basically what we're trying to do is pull the walls up and then give it some sort of shape. It doesn't have to look like this. Our reference of sexy pot is pretty much just anything that's got some curves to it. So the real mistake that most people make when they're making a vase or a shaped pot is that they like to scream sexy before they get the walls thin enough. So our first goal is always to be going up to build those walls and then make it sexy at the end. So I hope that a couple of these tips help, and let's go. All right, guys, let's get started. Again, as in every video, we want to try and start in the very center of my wheel. It makes the centering part a little easier. This is about 2.5 pounds, so I'm definitely going to cone it up. It's also recycled clay that came out of my Peter Pugger pug mill, the greatest thing that I've bought. Basically, what is a pug mill? It's going to take all of my recycled stuff, all of this sort of gooey stuff right here, and it just puts it through a big machine. It mixes it up with these big steel rotating blades, and then it de-airs it. So we have no air bubbles in the clay. As you guys might have heard before, I absolutely hate wedging. So this is the greatest thing ever. And now that I'm making these Kiranuki cups, you can see it on my Instagram and my Facebook, it creates this great shape like a tube. All right, guys. So what we're doing is we're gonna make a sexy pot. We want the central axis, I guess, of the sexy pot to be about this narrow. So the neck of my pot is either going to be narrower or the same thickness. So I'm gonna visualize making a cylinder that goes up this tall. I'm gonna scoop my pinky in a little bit. I don't wanna waste that clay when I start to pull it up. I'm gonna take 2 thumbs. I'm gonna push down. Now, a lot of people, when you go down, you end up with this sort of folded piece of clay around here. What I do to stop that is I use the sides of my thumbs to push that down and compress it as I go down. Now on this sexy pot, I think I want a hidden foot. So I need it to be thick enough for me to gut the inside of it. Let's see if I can find one. This one, the outside, as you can see, has no foot, and then the inside is a little thinner. So it's gonna kind of lift right off of the table without that interrupted foot ring. In my last video, Trimming is Magic, the sequel, I show you how to make that sort of hidden foot. So now I want the inside to be about this wide, and the reason why is I want this to lift up off of the table. And if I have it lifting off the table, that means there's a little air there. If I start down here, then we've kind of got almost like a milk jug, which is fine if that's what you're aiming for. But you do want to have intention before you sit down. I go to a lot of students and I go, what are you going to make? And they go, I don't know. You've got to have a plan. got to have a vision before you start. Sort of like waking up in the morning. I don't know. All right. So I've got the inside of my pot sort of squared off. When I say square, because again, it's a cylinder, not a bowl. And I'm going to start to pull my walls. Now, the important lesson taught when we talk about sexy pots is something called collaring. Collaring is literally, I believe, I could be making this up, putting your hands together and making a collar around your clay. So I guess the collar around your neck. So if you notice, I did that first pull, I hung out down here on the bottom, I grabbed some clay, and I'm sort of aiming towards the center of my pot to kind of keep it so that the neck is narrow. So when I tell people to start aiming for a volcano, a lot of people tend to do this. The inside hand tends to go straight up. We want that inside hand to go with it. Hold on to that sponge. If you're using a sponge, slow down, grab my clay, start to go up. Compress that lip. So you can see I'm sort of insinuating a sexy pot, but I'm not quite there. I'm not quite shaping it to go out yet. If I shape it to go out yet before my walls are thin enough, I'm going to end up with a pretty heavy pot. And the centripetal force is actually going to help it go out, and it's going to be a little bit more big bootied than you may have intended it to be. Okay. So I've got my walls taller. I'm going to get the water out of the inside, and next I'm going to collar. So the biggest mistake you can make, two biggest mistakes you can make when collaring, three biggest mistakes is number one, doing it too slow. So your hands have to go this slow if your wheel is going that slow. Mistake number one. Mistake number two is doing it while your hands are dry. This is a fast, sort of slimy motion we're gonna do, and you want your hands to be lubricated as you're going up. I said lubricated. And number three, your hand should be attached. If you have one hand here and one hand here, this is two separate tools. If your hands are attached, it's one tool. It's a lot easier to control one tool than two separate tools. So collaring is when your wheel is super fast, because we're gonna be doing a lot. I do it 6 points. I do thumbs together, knuckles bent like this, fingers on the sides. I start down on the bottom, always. Wheel going fast, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure, super duper pressure. And then we get worried because it starts to look wonky on top. But make sure you come all the way off and gently take off your hands, and you'll be able to sort of keep that round. If you go up here and then you do this, you're gonna end up with a little bit of a wonky lip, and then you're gonna stress. So go ahead and slowly take those hands off. Notice my thumbs are attached. Now, if my clay is out here and it was 1/8 of an inch, when I compressed it in and collared it in, this is now gonna be thicker. So now this is thicker than this. So we now wanna make a pull where we're almost pulling this a little bit, but we wanna thin this out. If we keep on collaring in this top and this is thin, the weight of this is going to actually squish down the pot. Now, how do I get my hand in here? Again, super duper wet, put it down in there, and start your pull. Now at this point, I want to start to insinuate sexy. Maybe a little prepubescent pot here. So I start to put with a little bit more pressure on my inside hand. And now I'm going to put a decent amount of pressure where I compressed it and where I collared it. Because now I want to make this as thin as this. Throw some water on here again. Start down here. No pressure, no pressure, no pressure, no pressure. Super duper pressure until I come on off that pot. Now I want to start to really get this a little rounder. I want to get a nice shoulder up here. So I'm going to get on here. Now these shaping pulls that I'm going to do, I do not want, I don't really want to be pinching. I don't want to thin the walls anymore, because as I stretch it, the walls now get thinner and weaker. So my wheel definitely does slow down. Get my hands in there. And now I'm going to put a little bit more pressure on my inside hand. I'm going to make sure I'm getting that full rotation. all the way before my hand goes up. Go back to my sort of micro pull, which is just 2 fingers. Okay, now what I'm happy about is that I've got this sort of uneven, wonky shape. That's gonna give me the chance to show you about one of my tools that I recently discovered. This tool right here is just your basic steel rib. It's flexible. For years I thought it was useless. But when I started to do something called crack pots, which there's a video on here somewhere, I realized that this was super helpful to be flexible and to kind of serve as a flat, straight finger. Your fingers are a little wonky. So when you put your fingers on the outside, you might get these fingerprints. So this serves as a wall. Hoping you guys can see this. Let's move this bucket. Get my hand inside, and now I'm going to push my clay towards that tool. I'm going to really be able to stretch it. Tend to close one eye. You can see what I'm doing. Sort of helps to get that sort of smooth transition. And also, if your pot is starting to sort of flop due to centripetal force, you can actually use this to sort of lift it up. Bucket back here. Wet my pot pretty well here. I'm going to start down on the bottom again. I'm going to see if I can get my neck a little narrower. Oop, hands got dry. I want you to notice what I did. I started here, but I noticed I didn't just do this. I went up and in. And the reason why I do that is if you just do this, your knuckles are probably going to push that down and make it a little on the floppy side. I'm going to fix my neck a little here. Seem to maybe, I'm going to finish it off by kind of folding over that top lip a little bit. Sometimes it's super hard to see what your pot looks like so close up, so I'll put my head all the way down here. I want this to be a little flatter. So the skill is to throw the pot, and then the aesthetics are a whole nother lesson. So there's a thing called the sponge on a stick. I don't have one right with me, but you can go ahead and get it in there and get some of the water out of the inside. And I think I'm going to call it a pot. I have a little bit of a weak spot here. Sometimes when I'm showing how to do stuff, I tend to go a little slower than I normally would be, which throws me off just a little bit. All right, I'm just gonna go in there. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of some of this excess down here. So the problem with the reclaimed clay that comes out of the pug mill is sometimes you find something hard and interesting in there. So there might be something hard and interesting in there. Go down here and get a little bit more off so I can ignore that hard and interesting spot. Get that out. Take my pin tool, put it flat underneath that loop of clay. Now ideally I would have liked to have gotten all this clay up in here, but I'm trying to improve on my ability. So sometimes, like I said, when there's water in there, you can go ahead and really quickly just dump that out carefully. That is a skill. And don't really love this shape here. So I'm gonna go back to it a little bit. I didn't wire it off yet, so I'm in pretty good shape. And a lot of people, you know, guys, if you do wire it, if your clay was just made, your pot was just made, it's probably still stuck. So you can see I didn't really love that line on the side of my pot there, so I'm just gonna, with 2 hands. Notice I always touch my tools in my pot with 2 hands. Much better. Kind of needed that smooth transition. So that's our sexy pot. There's a whole part of aesthetics, like I said earlier, that make a little bit more of a difference. The laws of threes. Maybe we'll do a whole nother video on that. Basically, we've got 1/3 and 2/3, and innately, inherently, humans are more attracted to that ratio. Now we go into the whole science of art. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this set up for a little bit and watch out for another video. I'll show you how I trim this using what we call a chuck. So there's two ways of using a chuck. We can have one already made, or I can make one to fit each piece. But that's pretty much it. My sexy pot on a Saturday morning. So again, I hope you guys are enjoying my videos. I'm actually learning so much by doing them. So please share, tell everyone about it, subscribe, like me on TikTok, follow me on Instagram, and don't forget our pottery sale in October. Talk to you guys soon. See ya.